Since I started collecting comic books, I've noticed a few particular patterns that arise that help make collecting comics a little bit easier. Things like how different publishers will treat a story or a character, or the different ways ads are concerned within books. But one particular pattern that I found very useful is that you should never underestimate kids' comics. So bear with me on that. Oftentimes, it's the kids' comics where major publishers will put their up and rising artists and writers. So if you want to see like who's going to be really big in Marvel and in DC particularly, look at their kids' comics and you might find some patterns arise. And plus, besides that, all of the artists and writers who do work on kids' comics, oftentimes they're looking to rise above that and move on to some of the bigger titles. So they do really, really good work on these kids' comics so that they get noticed. Now, as an adult fan of Toy Story and a lot of adult fans of usually kid-centric stuff will get this, they don't really make stuff for me. They make stuff for kids who are like way younger than I am. And that brings me to today's topic. We're talking about Toy Story Adventures. Now, this book, it might actually be more important than you realize as far as how Disney comics are. Last week, we talked a little about Disney's manga offerings that they've been working on in the past few years. But there's that side of things. Then there's the IDW side of things where they mostly publish their individual books. And then they have books like this as their main comic line that they build based off of movie properties. So, is it any good? And what can we really learn about the future of Disney Comics through something like this? Well, let's hop in and find out. Now, Toy Story Adventures can be split into two different parts. You have the short stories that were published as part of the Toy Story 3 magazine in preparation for that movie's release. And you have much longer actual book-length stories that were published by Marvel Comics, of all people. Weird, right? You know what this means, though. Toy Story is officially a part of the MCU now. Confirmed. So, let's go ahead and talk about the Marvel Comics first. Now, the thing about these Marvel Comics is that they are really dumbed down, and to the point where it feels like it's kind of pandering and just kind of lugging along for the sake of younger readers. Which is strange because of the 4 Marvel stories that are in this book, 2 of them are just remakes of some stuff from the earlier Boom Kids line. Now, we've talked about the Boom Kids line a lot on this channel, particularly The Return of Buzz Lightyear and Toy Overboard. I have videos on both of them, I'll put them in the description. But the thing about the Boom Kids line was that it was really good, and it was definitely worthy of the Toy Story line, and reading it felt like it was another movie that was just kind of lost to time. It was really good. But here, they remake some of them, and I can't pinpoint it, but something they did with the art, something they did with the dialogue, just really dumbed it down and made it feel like it was talking down to me, almost. The Marvel Comics sections of these, the longer stories, they just really fall short of what the Toy Story movies have set as the standard for adventure and for action and for comedy. It feels flat. It feels like it was a half effort to make these stories happen. But what about the short stories? There's the Marvel ones, which are like, I don't know, 15 to 20 pages. And then you have all of these smaller 2 to 4 page stories. Are those any good? And surprisingly, they're better. The small-time adventures that were in this magazine that was built for kids, it actually works really well in this shorter format. Like, if we look at the Marvel stories here, we have one Marvel story where they're just telling like ghost stories around a campfire. And that's fine and whatever else, but it really doesn't deserve that long of a book, you know? Like, the payoff at the end just isn't worth 15 pages. However, we get into the shorter stories, and we have one where like Woody has like this identity crisis where he feels like he needs to learn kung fu and become a ninja sheriff. And it takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages. That's sufficient. It doesn't overstay its welcome, and none of the short stories really do overstay their welcome. If they require needing to be longer, then they're longer. If they need to be shorter, then they're shorter. And it works out just fine. Yeah, they're still obviously made for kids, but as an adult reader and adult collector, I've noticed that it does have a little bit more meat to it. There are still some interesting things there that you can notice and are still kind of a fun time. Now what about the art? It's a comic book. Art is important for comics. It makes up most of the story, so how's the art? The art in the Marvel Comics section is perfect. It is pristine. It's almost like a computer did it. It doesn't feel organic at all. It's extremely consistent, it's extremely solid, but then sometimes you notice that the artist just totally, he just copied like the promo art for the movie to make the art. All of a sudden it feels less than it should. On the other hand, the short stories are much less consistent. They're a lot more exaggerated. You can see the changing art styles. It feels like there's an actual person behind it. Overall, I've noticed in my time reading these, and you'll probably notice this too as you look through the different comics we've covered here, that the Toy Story line is kind of like that one meme, you know, where like the picture is super intricate while the caption is super simple, and as the caption gets more complex, the art gets less complex and more rudimentary. Does that meme have a name? I don't know, but it feels like that. If you want a great Toy Stories, if you want a good Toy Story, in comic form at least, then chances are the best ones are going to have the worst art. And that holds true even with something like this. So the question, would I recommend Toy Story Adventures to you? Yes, on two requirements here. One, if you're a kid or a parent of a kid who wants to get into comics, or you want to try and introduce your kid to comics, if they're like an early reader, then Toy Story Adventures is pretty good, I would say. It's a good start to reading. And two, if you're trying to complete a Toy Story comics collection, like me, I am, which means that like this is one of the check boxes you just kind of have to check off. No way around it, unfortunately. I love kids books, and I do believe that kids books have great potential to kind of help shape the next world, you know? Kids are going to read this, they're going to digest the stories and the morals, and I think that kids books have a great power to become not just that, but like general audience books. It's something to really sink your teeth into. And unfortunately, this just isn't one. It doesn't have legs as a general audience book like many of the other Toy Story books we've covered. In fact, all of the other Toy Story books I've covered have legs as general audiences, but not this. So here's what I say. If you want to read a Toy Story book, then hop on to Amazon, or I would recommend Thrift Books, and look up some of the Boom Kids titles and read those, because those are fantastic. Those are really good if you're looking for a good Toy Story book to read. Or there's the Toy Story manga, I covered that last time, it was pretty good. However, if you're into this, then I do have some recommendations for you too. If you or like a kid or like someone in your life is interested in this, then I would also recommend Incredibles 2. They have a comic series. It kind of runs along the same lines, I've noticed. It's very kid-oriented. There's a Disney Princess line of comics from Dark Horse that fills the same kind of void. So, I mean, if it's like a kid that's not into Toy Story but into princesses, there's that option. And if you are interested, this is volume 1. There is a volume 2 out. And I haven't read it. I'm trying to get to it. But I'm stuck in my house because the world is just crazy. So there you go. That's my thoughts on Toy Story Adventures. We've gotten another Toy Story comic down. This has been fun. I've been loving Toy Story Month. I hope you've been enjoying it too. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments about like what kind of books you'd like to see or anything else you're curious about. Let's talk. And until next time, thank you for joining me. Have a great day. And remember to always be your best self.